Having lived through the past 3 years and facing the beginning of another one, 2024, I think it's important that we take a deep dive into narratives so we can be mentally ready for the year ahead and everything that's going to come our way. First off, we need to understand how narratives really work. For starters, a narrative is simply brain fuel. Just like how jets and cars run on fuel, our human minds run on narratives. To understand and unpack any coherent thought, our feeble minds first require a superstructure of meaning to which a thought can attach itself. The superstructure or foundation of meaning into which the brain incorporates new thoughts could just as easily be called a narrative. A narrative is just a story. In fact, your whole life really is just a story. Your job, your family, loved ones, well, that's a real story. Your friends, your religion, the political party you belong to the home you live in, to the car you drive, and even to the gym you're a member of, all are just stories. To have any meaning at all, every conceivable notion must be attached to an existing story. In fact, every waking moment, our minds are processing stories, churning them over and over again. But that's not the end of it. Guess what? We also dream in stories. Therefore, it shouldn't come as any great surprise that those wanting to manipulate us begin all such deviant exercises with what? That's right, you guessed it, a story. Story is both their hammer and sickle when it comes to shaping your thoughts. Imagine, if you will, a conflict bubbling up in some far-off land, and your benevolent political leaders want you to choose a side, but not just any side, but the right side. They first begin with a good and compelling story, of course, and it's a given that any good story must have compelling characters that draw you in and engage you. And most important, these characters must be in conflict, engaged, of course, in a life and death struggle between good and evil. These characters need to be colorful ones, with no question as to who the good guys are, as well the unquestionable evil ones. Think enlightened vaxxers versus Neanderthal anti-vaxxers, or brave trans folks yearning to be free versus dogmatic, theocratic, religious zealots, namely Christians, wanting to cast them out of society. 2, suppress minorities, especially blacks, versus systemic racists, namely whites, or old-fashioned conservative Republicans versus open-minded Democrats and liberals. The greater the conflict, the better for the narrativists. For example, this gem. If Putin isn't soundly beaten in Ukraine, then he will attack Poland, and before you know it, we'll all be eating pierogies and borscht. So, what's a good citizen to do? Simple. Upload a Ukrainian flag to your social media bio picture and single-handedly save the world. Kinda odd though, these same narrative writers are silent when it comes to Xi and his ambitions to reunify or take over Taiwan. Now, to promote the approved narrative, our overlords need a little help in terms of mass circulation. So, enter Hollywood. After all, who better than demigod celebrities? Madonna? I don't know. Off-the-shelf characters with brand reputation that will allow rapid digestion of the new narrative and clearly lay out its core conflict for the audience, us. There are rules to selling good narratives, though. For example, conflicts arise between identifiable characters on both sides of the issue. So it's not countries that are at odds with each other, but their representatives. And voila, you have characters out of central casting, like Putin and Zelensky. You must be able to dumb down the conflict down to an easily digestible one. A complicated conflict involving relative economies, past infractions by either country, and a bunch of demographics and statistics won't cut mustard. All those things are simply too hard to explain to the audience, thereby lacking the ability to evoke emotional buy-in. No, what we need, folks, is a classic sound bite-sized conflict. At the end of the day, all we really need is recognizable, memorable characters with attractive, and in some cases not so attractive faces and backstories, and engaging personalities, and we're off to the races. Mirroring the conflict when it comes to character, the simpler, the better, stupid. Just keep in mind, underdog is by far the easiest narrative to sell. Imagine a gutsy former comedian and actor, a man of the people, full of chutzpah, in military fatigues, leading a smaller democratic nation against an evil, power-hungry tyrant leading a much larger oppressive nation. I know, sounds eerily familiar, classic face-off. Now, throw in a few small supporting cast of characters, simpletons who can start filling in backstories by adding a few strong details, and of course, dress them for the part, and the narrativists are off and running. And before you can say babushka, we have on one side Vladimir Putin, our cold, clean-shaven, calculating, evil dictator who always wears a dark blue navy business suit like Wall Street banker or any conservative. Opposite to him, we have our hero, Vladimir Zelensky, our socially awkward, short-bearded, piano-playing, naive underdog, an everyday man of the people. A French resistance type, minus the beret, of course. Another fundamental of effective narrative manipulation is to avoid ambiguity, especially moral ambiguity. If you can't tell the white hats from the black hats, the narrative needs a rewrite. In our current example, it's not good for the two countries to share blame for the conflict. Ascribing fault shouldn't even be arguable. The two sides must be as opposite as, well, men and women, for example. One nation must be clearly in the wrong, and by extension, so is their champion, and the other nation 100% justified, as is their champion by extension. Thus, folks such as anti-abortionists, anti-vaxxers, cannot be permitted to have any kind of a point, however minor it may be, because it would muddle the approved narrative. If there's any wiggle room for reasonable argument about a conflict's morality, who should win, for example, then the narrative ceases to lose all power as a useful mind control and numbing tool. Of course, when it suits them, the deep state narrativists are happy to introduce a little moral ambiguity. When the narrative no longer suits them, it definitely comes to play. Case in point, a few days ago, corporate media reported the possibility of compromise in the Ukraine proxy war, now indicating that just maybe giving Russia a little land could be a good thing, which of course signals the end of the opposite tried and true former narrative. Further reinforcing the idea that proxy war in Ukraine might be ending is they're now painting Putin as a rational leader, with whom a ceasefire could possibly be brokered. Wait a minute, wasn't this the same Putin that used to be a demonic instrument of pure evil, who could not only ever be trusted, but needed to be removed from any semblance of power? What changed? And again, I'm not apologizing for him, I'm just unpacking this narrative for us. Now, characters in an effective narrative must be larger than life, presented as outlandish cartoon characters, not as real people. So you see, real people are complex and lugging baggage after all, which introduces moral ambiguity into our story. There must be nothing good whatsoever about our villains, like Putin, who is concerned about US biolabs, ironically enough, in Ukraine, though. Which means, of course, our hero is an angelic angel. Take Zelensky, for example. It's not like he's been enriching himself with aid money, foreign aid money, no. Another thing to keep in mind is that narratives never end. You see, even when it looks like one is coming to an end, like weeds, a new one pops right up. Don't believe me? Even though our honest media is talking about compromise, it's not ending the narratives. After all, if you were to believe the media's latest simplistic rendering of the situation, as though the decision to negotiate an end to the Ukraine war were Putin's alone, and didn't also involve the entire Russian government, the country's 150 million citizens, not to mention a global group of allies, enemies, and complex interrelated military and financial interests who've all benefited from the current narrative, nope, it's only Putin and Zelensky. That's the narrative. Just two guys locked in a room, sitting over a bottle of vodka, ironing it out. Kind of makes it easy to single out blame if it's fails or stalls, huh? I can't guarantee you what's going to come in 2024, but I can promise you the narratives will come even harder and faster. Why? Well, we can't have too many people coming out of the ether and starting to ask questions. I'll do my best to point them out so we can begin by first identifying what script are they pushing this time. Are we being offered breakfast cereal for mental midgets? Or is our trusted media honestly offering us an intellectual ribeye dinner, treating us as, dare I say it, adults and fellow citizens? Or are they once again trying to trick us with narrative-coated chocolate donuts? You and I need to ask questions like, what's the real conflict? Who are the narrative's main characters? Are they presented realistically with human flaws as well as strengths, or drawn as cartoon villains and heroes? How is the media oversimplifying this issue? How are they obscuring real and true moral arguments? I, for one, am committed to resisting all the new narratives this year. And more than just that, plan to double down and disassemble the damn things one by one, knowing all the while that our media is committed to rebuilding them in new forms. Think of it like a never-ending Friday the 13th movies. But I can't do it alone. I'll need your help to do it, but popcorn's on you. Anyway, thank you for watching. I do appreciate it. Please post any comments you have in the comment section. You can also follow me at my Rumble and my Locals account. If you haven't yet subscribed to my Twitter or X, it's at Camera612, and I will see you next time.